All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the project proposal workshop. It's led by Sapna, who I'll introduce briefly. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the executive director for SEDS. And I'm also part of the judging committee for the Space for All Spring Challenge. Before we get into it, I did want to talk briefly about what the challenge entails. So to clear up, this is an opportunity for projects that are brand new or already existing to get up to $10,000 in sponsorship from our partnership with XBOX and Starfield. The project themselves can be any part of the segment of space. It can be agriculture, robotics, a CubeSat. The important thing is that they all have to have some sort of component that gives back to the community, whether it's you bringing in your local high school to learn about space science or going to the K through 12 community to teach them about your project specifically. So we're interested in any way that you want to incorporate that into your project, but it is a very important component. All right, next slide. All right, so talking through this project proposal workshop will be Sapna Rao. She is a senior systems engineer at Lockheed Martin. She's also on our Young Professionals Advisory Board at SEDS-USA. You might have seen her a couple of times at Space Vision for those of you that have attended. She's been on various panels. And when she was in school, she was the president of Virginia Tech SEDS. I will also mention that if you guys have any questions, please use the chat feature to post them. On there will be Jay, who is also the lead for this Space for All project. He will be answering some of those questions. But brief reminder that at the end of Sapna's presentation, we will have an open Q&A. All right, Sapna, take it away.
I was muted, sorry about that. I'm very excited to talk to all of you on the call about proposals. I feel like when I was in college, I didn't really know what proposals were. I didn't really have anything like this at the time to put something together for. And most of what I've learned from proposals has been while working at Lockheed. I've worked on a few more like research and development type proposals, but recently I've worked on the next GOES mission proposal for Lockheed. So that's a pretty big dollar proposal, several billions of dollars, and is I think like 8 spacecraft for the span of about 15 years. So pretty long-term proposals. And in that recent one, I was the proposal lead. So I worked to lead my whole team to put together the technical piece, the cost, the business strategy piece, kind of put the whole thing together. And what I did with this whole presentation is things that I've learned that you won't really find, in things online, things that I've found from experience. Also, this is how, my company does proposals and how the groups I've worked on have. There's lots of different ways to approach this area, and this is just my take. So yeah, take it as advice and not really a blueprint you have to follow. So first off, what is a project proposal? And if people in the chat want to interact and put their answers in, feel free to. But overall, project proposal is a way for you to suggest a project, suggest a way that you're going to answer a question, a method of producing something. And there's a lot of different types of proposals. Obviously, there's the actual marriage proposal, and then there's something where it's more of proposing a new idea that we see on the right side. So it's not always what you find when you Google search. And there are lots of different types of proposals. And I've kind of laid out a diagram, and there's obviously more than just this, but these are the things that I could think of. So those of you, you're all in college, research proposals are pretty big, and probably what more is more common in the academic world. So those are things for grants. So these are proposals that professors are really looking for. So it could be government grants, it could be research grants from companies, things like that. And there are ways that are more focused on the research, so developing and getting more information on something. It's not necessarily producing a commercial, product. And that kind of goes into the next type of proposal, which is more of a business pitch. So this is new ways to do strategy. So maybe like a very innovative, business related to software for space. Basically all the space startups that we see started as this like new business, new company type business pitch. And they had to put together slide decks explaining why their programmer company or technology is the best. And then the next piece is the technical proposal, which is more common to companies like Lockheed or Northrop or Boeing, where the government will have a new mission they want to do, or they have like a new technology they want. For example, lunar 5G. That was a big proposal that happened last year around this time, where the government solicited proposals for the commercial industry to submit ideas for how they would do that. So technical proposals are more what I've dealt with, and I think a bit more of what you guys are all going to be working on with this awesome SEDS project. And so kind of getting into what do you do when you first start doing a proposal, you need to put together a really great team. And I can't emphasize the importance of this. You want a group of people that you can trust, that you can rely on, a group of people that have different expertises in different areas. I've kind of laid out some of the different areas. So for example, I have been the proposal team lead before. I've also done work with the technical concept lead. What that really is someone who is, knows the technical idea really well and can describe it really well. Next is cost. So that is someone who's really good at estimating the price of things using historical market research, or just looking at other industries and putting together assumptions for how much things would cost. So that one's actually really important and something that you need a really good person at, or someone who's willing to learn about it. Next is business strategy. And so this is someone who kind of gets more of the business model side. Maybe they've taken a business class, or they're just like really interested in business and are self-taught in that area. Next is something that is often overlooked, is the graphics and proposal writing area. Honestly, there's a big skill set with proposal writing. It's putting together ideas and communicating them so that it's one very simple and a quick sentence. It's not like a very long-winded sentence. For example, I've worked with people who are very smart and write, very well in terms of English, but their sentences basically 3 sentences combined, and it's hard to understand what they're saying. So there is an art to kind of reducing the sentence, like what you're trying to say, into making it very easy to understand and comprehend. And also putting together graphics. Something you'll hear me say later on is that a picture is worth 1,000 words, something we've all heard before. But in proposals I've worked, there's very strict formatting and page number guidelines. And a picture can oftentimes replace an entire page's worth of content just by having a very powerful graphic. And that could be something like a flow chart. It could be like a ConOps diagram. It could be, like even graphs, like bar graphs, line graphs. Pie charts are not my favorite, but some people really enjoy them. So really being someone who's really good at communicating through writing or a diagram of some kind, having someone who has that skill set is really good. The next one is someone who really knows the proposal requirements. And that's someone who might not really be very technical, but someone who will be dedicated to kind of memorizing everything that the proposal has And I know Sarah and Jay and the rest of the SEDS team, they put together those requirements for you. So on your team, you kind of want someone whose job is to memorize those requirements and make sure, as the whole team is putting together the proposal, that those requirements are being met. Because if you don't meet them, you could be disqualified. Like there's some crazy stuff on the government side where if you have a single requirement you don't meet, even something so simple as using the wrong font size in a graphic, in a single graphic, they can disqualify your entire proposal and throw it in the trash because you did not comply with the requirements. I don't think this is going to be as strict, but as you guys enter the industry, it's good to know that it's good to start developing that skill and realizing the importance of following the requirements. So it's actually really good to have someone whose main job is that. And after that are really the subsystem section leads. So for example, on the next generation weather satellite proposal I worked on, we had like a propulsion subsystem lead, we had a structures lead, we had a software lead, we had all these different subsystems, and we had a person whose primary job was just their section. And my job as a proposal lead was to make sure that all the different sections work together and that it told like the bigger story of our concept and why it was so good. So just something to be aware of, you can have multiple section leads. So these are all the people I'd recommend you have on your team. They can share roles. Like you can have one person, be proposal requirements lead and also do the be really good at the graphics and proposal writing. You can have people wear multiple hats, but at the minimum you want all these roles there, and that will really help you be organized and have a strong team. So now getting into more of the steps that you'll have to take and how this works, like what the steps even are. This is kind of what I put together, kind of like a 5-step bigger process, and we'll dive deeper into each of these throughout the presentation. So first off is identify customer needs. So who is your customer and what matters to them most? And this, I think, is almost one of the trickiest things. Looking back at the government, if our customer is NASA, there's different NASA centers. There's NASA Goddard, there's NASA JSC, NASA KSC, and JPL. Like there's all these different centers that have very different, almost personalities and things that they prefer. For example, NASA Goddard, for them, the whole weather satellite, the next generation weather satellite, is something our country absolutely needs. We wouldn't have any weather data if the next generation GOES satellite didn't exist. And that's, as you can imagine, disastrous for our country and in general parts of the world. So they really want the spacecraft to be risk-free, and they want a guarantee that it's going to work and that it's going to be delivered and launched on time. They really care about risk reduction and like meeting the schedule. Those are their top things. And so because Lockheed's worked with this customer before, we know that. So this, going into my next point, really goes into the win themes that we write for ourselves. But really spend some time digging into your customer, doing research, seeing what they've previously done, and maybe even, if you're allowed to, asking what are the biggest important things, because you'll have all these things in the scoring criteria that SEDS has put together, but which one of those things matters the most, and which one of the things is something that your team can specifically deliver on. For example, looking at the next gen weather satellite program again, it's let's look at the competitors. So it's Lockheed, Maxar, and Northrop. Those are the 3 companies competing. Lockheed has done this before, so we have risk reduction and schedule confidence. Northrop is going to try to do it at a cheaper cost. So if the customer wanted a cheaper cost, they would go with the Northrop option. But Northrop is still a very confidence instilling company because it's a big defense contractor. So there is still some confidence there. And then the third one is Maxar, which is a smaller company, going to be doing things cheaper. So it's going to be a lower cost, but they've never done anything like this, so it's a higher risk. So what it boils down to is, out of the 3 options, which one does the customer care about more? And that's something we'll find when the proposal gets awarded end of May. That's something we don't know right now. But that's the main thing why you need to care what the customer cares about. Next are win themes. So win themes are the superpowers of your team. So what is your team really good at that your competitors can't really do? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more in detail. Next is the RFP dissection. So after you figured out what your team is really good at, you have to dissect that request for proposal, or RFP, that SEDS has provided you. Make sure you kind of make a checklist almost with every single item, so you don't forget anything, because again, it can lead to disqualification. And next after that is outline and delegate. So this is outline your proposal and use that RFP that you dissected in the previous step to put together what your proposal looks like. And sometimes you might be like, oh, I want to weave a story with my proposal, but it's oftentimes better to just take the RFP structure that the customer provided and write your proposal exactly like that. So for example, the customer broke up the requirements in terms of propulsion systems engineering, spacecraft structures, and we kept that same structure in our proposal because it makes it so easy. The customer will literally print out their requirements and take a red pen and check off things and circle things in the proposal, and go through it. So just stick to the outline you get, and also delegate different sections. As proposal team lead, I trusted my team to own the sections that we had assigned them. So it was like, okay, you're gonna do this piece, and I'm not gonna micromanage you. I'm gonna just believe that you're working this properly. So definitely delegate, because you can't do everything yourself. And then the last one, which is probably takes the most amount of time, is putting it all together and reviewing it. So this is taking your outline and your draft and putting it together in a single voice document. And then we'll talk about wall walks later as well, as a way to review your proposal. So kind of talking on customer needs, I talked about this a little bit as well. So these could also be things that the customer doesn't explicitly mention that they need, but things you have to do research on to figure out. So look at politics, look at proposal history, what they've awarded previously, things like that. And looking at the different customer types, there's usually government, commercial, academia. And I'd say the SEDS proposal is kind of in that commercial / academia group combined there. So this is just what I put together. Obviously, it's definitely not the only things that these customers care about, but usually for government, they're really risk averse and cost limited. We can see that with NASA currently, with the budget not being approved yet and having some programs get cut. The government can't control how much money they get. It's really after what happens after the budget gets solidified. And then with commercial, it's a little different, where they want max return on investment, and they're more open to innovation and trying new things. Sometimes the government doesn't really want innovation because it could be adding risk on. But it again depends on the exact government customer. And lastly, academia, which is very open to innovation, so new ideas, using new tools, but again, is cost limited. So these are examples of customer needs and traits that I would urge all of you in your proposals you're putting together to come up with, just so you have an idea what you're kind of up against and how likely you are to get selected. So after customer needs, our next step was identifying win themes. So these are, what are the superpowers of your team? So let's say going back to, where I went to college, Virginia Tech, our big strength is we have a lot of satellite and communications based professors. So our strength is really in comms. But depending on your university, you'll have professors that are specialized for different areas. For example, CU Boulder has a lot of human space exploration and more human-based professors. So maybe a project around that would be better for that school, but also whatever your SEDS chapter is more experienced with, whatever your team members are more passionate about and knowledgeable about, that is kind of your focus point. And then the next part is, what are you bringing to the table that none of your other competitors can? So again, that's leaning on your professors and all the research and resources available to you in your university, and write these down. These are your themes of your proposal. They should be everywhere. They should be reiterated everywhere, because you want the person reading this to get very obviously that this is the benefit for going with this option. And so you want this to be kind of written in post-it notes everywhere, and you want it to be weaved into your proposal as well. So the thing that we did was we figured out our win themes, and then we put them in every document that we sent our team to write things for, so they would just see it everywhere. And again, the best thing to do is have like the few people who are the leaders of the proposal take a stab at putting these win themes together, and then work it out with the rest of the team and get feedback and try to have something that they really dig into figuring out as the leadership. And again, this is how you differentiate your proposal. So the next step is RFP dissection. Again, make like a checklist, and have it be the RFP line by line criteria that you can just check off. And that's including things like word count. And I know the SEDS proposal has some word count limitations. It's something that's really easy. You're like, oh, if I do like, I don't know, 501 or like even 600, it won't matter. But if you go over the limit of, let's say, 500, it might mean disqualification. And it's such an easy thing for you to hit that there's no reason you should miss it. So make a checklist and make sure everything you're doing follows that. So I'm going to quickly go over this, and I think Sarah, you're going to hop on quickly to go over the outline more. But using your win themes and your RFP checklist, make an outline of your entire proposal. So this can be in things like LaTeX or Google Docs. Honestly, LaTeX is amazing, and I used it a lot in college. For obvious, security reasons at Lockheed, we don't use it, but anything that will format things nicely for you, and also promote collaboration is definitely the move to go. And assign different people different parts of the outline and have them fill it in, and put together what they think should be in there. Also put in descriptions of the graphics. So if you want like a diagram or a chart, you don't have to put that together at this stage, but at least put an idea down so you can run it by your team members and get some support. And again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So lots of diagrams with useful captions can really get your message across better than having a whole page devoted to explaining something. So this is kind of how you're going to go about the outline. And this is kind of my suggested outline structure. Sarah, is this what you put together, or?
No, mine's the next slide.
Okay, got it. So this is the outline structure I put together. Again, these charts, we'll make them available to you, so you can feel free to use them, but I'll let Sarah take over for the Space for All outline structure.
Thank you. Okay, yes, so the Space for All, it's somewhat similar to Sapna's. I would say that ours doesn't have the business component as much, but I've gone ahead and created it on this left-hand side. You can find the full project template or proposal template on the Space for All website. I know Jay will be posting the link in the chat soon. But since I'm here, I did want to mention that only one proposal is accepted by chapter. And the first proposal matters. So you can have a proposal that covers different projects if it's a system of projects that one kind of feeds into the other. And in a sense, they all should be that because of that community component object. But only one matters. And the faculty advisor sign off is really important. It's one of the ways that we're able to keep up with your milestones, how you're doing at your university. And it also is another way for us to engage with their chapter, because once leadership changes, we know that certain chapters can have a bit of time during that turnover process. We would like your proposal to be at most 10 pages. If you wanted to do more, you know, go for it, but 10 is like a hard max for us. And make sure that all the formatting is the same, that the charts, the graphs, that they're all similar. As I mentioned, we have the project proposal template, and you don't have to follow that to the T. It doesn't have to be a copy and paste, but it does have to answer the same questions that we're looking for the answers on that template. It could be that your project requires a different structure, but overall, as long as you have something that is easy to follow, that we know where to look for what, that will be very helpful. Alongside with that, as Sapna has mentioned, you really recommend that you use that project template and the rubric that's all on that same document to create the requirements and assign that to one person in your team, so that you make sure that you cross off all your T's, because the quality of your proposal for us is also a way for us to gaze into what the quality of your project and your teamwork is like. So make sure that it's really top notch. Last three things I wanted to touch on, and then I'll give it back to Sapna, is really focus on schedule. And, you know, if you have any historic performance that you can talk about, maybe you've done a project similar to this, but not quite, and what were some of the lessons learned from that. Also, as far as budget and finances go, you will have to create that into the schedule that you send us, because we're not going to send you the funds all at once. We will send it to you based on when you need certain materials. So make sure you factor into that how long it takes for your school to process that. And we can certainly work with you, but we will only disperse funds as you're meeting certain milestones. And last thing is the community outreach component. So we're definitely looking for something holistic that isn't just a, you know, we gave out pamphlets to our nearby high school and call it a day. We definitely want something where we can say that the community actually got a lot of value out of your project from a STEAM perspective, so that you're helping generations down the line and not just your chapter. All right. I'll turn it back to you, Sapna.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is really useful, and thanks for clearing up those parts of how this is all going to work for the SED side. And I will say, for schedule, if you just don't know how to make a good schedule graphic, a very common schedule graphic type is called a Gantt chart, G-A-N-T. Just to give you an idea, if you aren't really sure how to put that together in a diagram, there's lots of different types of ways to diagram things that I would recommend. Either we, ask questions at the end of this, or you can reach out to me afterwards, and we can help you figure out how best to communicate that. So yeah, this is very good information. Will get you started with your outline. So the next step is the putting it all together and reviewing piece. This is probably the most critical part of the whole proposal process. This is taking your outline and adding in all the bullet points that you had written down and making full sentences and make final graphics. Again, for graphics, for the color choices, you want to keep them pretty muted. You don't want them to take away from the content that's in there. So I'd say like more neutral tones or more cool tones. Red is just like an angry color, so I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of red. But things like that, just filling everything in and finishing it up. And for those of you, I'm personally someone who does a lot of model-based systems engineering with my job, and I'm a big fan in general. And I know a lot of universities are also doing this. You can use that to build diagrams to show your architecture or your ConOps or your flow. And yeah, leverage that, because I think it shows that you're using innovative tools and is going to help bolster the confidence that Sara and the rest of the people managing this are going to have in your proposal. And yeah, so spend a lot of time with that. And also the single voice thing is actually really important because you are delegating this whole thing to a bunch of people. Oftentimes it'll just read like a jigsaw puzzle of different voices, and people use different words. Like I had a coworker who would use the word literally a lot. We would have things where people would spell out spacecraft, or they would say like S/C for spacecraft, like using different references. Make sure everyone is calling things in your proposal the same thing, common words, and that it sounds like it's made by one person. So this is where proposal team lead will really help, and also the person who's kind of responsible for the proposal requirements can really help with the review here. So I would suggest spending a lot of time with that because it sounds like a little thing, but can be big in how it reads. And use third person point of view preferably. So refer to your team. For example, like Lockheed Martin is proposing this thing. Don't use words like me, I, us, we, our. Like, try to just use third person POV. This is just kind of like the standard in the industry. And also acronyms. If you start doing acronyms, because aerospace is only acronyms, make sure you spell them out the first time they're used, and after that just use the acronym, but make an acronym list that you'll put in your references/appendices section. And also with references, make sure you do properly refer to things, because if you don't, that's plagiarism and we don't want to deal with that. So make sure you have proper references. And another really great tactic that we did for reviewing is called a wall walk. And you can definitely do a digital version of this as well. But what we did, we printed out our whole proposal, and it was more than the 10 pages you guys have. It was like over 100 pages for one section. So it was very big. And we would literally tape it up on the wall of a conference room, and then everyone on the proposal team would just spend like a whole week going through different sections, talking to the author of the section, like, hey, you mentioned this in your section, but it doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain it? Or can we add these things to make it more clear? So a lot of peer review. You want different people on your team to read sections that they had nothing to do with, because they have a fresh perspective and they've worked on other parts of the proposal. And another really critical thing is having teams that are kind of related. So for example, propulsion, G&C, mission operations, those different areas should read each other's proposals because they are very intrinsically related and have common products. So if you have a common product like that, or just it's a very closely related team, make sure that their sections line up really well, and you don't have redundant information, because if you have redundant information, you're wasting your page count and also making things complicated for the reviewer to read. So look out for things like that. And yeah, the wall walk was a really great way for our team to all be in person and figure out all the issues and read the whole proposal in a way that's more fun than just sitting on your computer. And I'm sure you could do this virtually, where maybe you guys just dedicate time during the week. You're all students, so you have classes and stuff. Dedicate time, like a specific time during the day, where you're all on a call, or you have the proposal on your computers and you're all in a room, and you just spend time reviewing each other's sections. Reviewing is very critical. Cannot emphasize that enough. And it'll put together a very refined proposal that again will reflect positively on your team. And yeah, you're always going to find something you want to change, so you will surprise yourself. So the last slide I have before we get into more like Q&A, the Q&A segment, are useful tips and tricks. So as a proposal team lead, a big thing I had to do was stay organized. So this meant documenting things, keeping track of the progress of different authors, So for example, I had a document, like a spreadsheet, where I was tracking how many pages people had written so far and how much that added up to, because we had a certain page count we couldn't go over. So keeping track of your page count, and also who has reviewed your document that you need review from, what are things you need more help with, more information from. If you're rendering graphics, like if you have CAD and you're rendering your fancy CAD files, what's the status of that? And yeah, just keeping track of how everyone's doing, because sometimes there'll be someone who gets really tied up if they have a test or a big project due, and you want to make sure as proposal lead, you know how that's going and you're keeping an eye on it, and you're providing them support if they're unable to help out in a certain amount of time. Maybe you're like, okay, we're gonna have this other person come in and support because you're too busy. So definitely stay organized and keep track of everything. And again, as I mentioned before, how people in different sections talk to each other. So related sections should be working together. Because a common thing that we did, again, we were limited by page count, and that was the hardest thing with the government proposals. And Sarah's recommending you do 10 pages, so I would stick to that. Is making sure you're not duplicating talking about something in multiple areas, because that's just wasting space. And you can refer to things in different sections. You can be like, hey, look at section 3.2.1 or whatever, or refer to this graphic number 12. So by having those sections numbered and graphics numbered, you can do references instead of writing all the text. And so that'll save you some space. So yeah, just make sure you're not doing redundant information and you're working together. So the next piece is the win themes again. This is something that does often get overlooked. What we did in our proposal, for each section, we actually wrote specific win themes we wanted them to cover. So we had our main win themes, and we would assign those and even have other ones for different areas. For example, for mission operations, for example, if a company has done mission operations a lot, they might say, hey, we have a lot of experience. These are all the missions we've done mission operations for. Here's our success. And that is, again, hitting the win theme of we have done this before, and then hitting the customer need of risk reduction and high reliability. So just trying to weave those in throughout your different sections and tuning them a little bit. So the next part is make templates. As Sarah said, you want things to look the same. So it also goes for tables, graphics, and sections. You want the color of the table header to be the same. You want the font size to be the same. You want the font in general to be the same. You want the spacing to look similar. All of these things seem really nitpicky and small, but when you do them really well, it all looks like a very professional, well curated proposal. So spend time doing this little cleanup type stuff at the end. And here's another really expert tip that we learned from our proposal, which is read the proposal from the last section to the beginning. It's similar to, books. For example, like the Harry Potter series. I feel like I've read the first book so many times because I always want to start it and I never finish it. And I've just read the first few books a lot, but I haven't read, the seventh book as much because I just haven't gone through the series as much. So similar to that, start in the last section and work your way to the first. And that way you are ensuring the last section gets as much review as the first section does. It's a little strange to do just internally in your brain, but highly recommend trying it out so you don't, forget about that last section. And the last piece is get other people to review your proposal and provide feedback. At Lockheed, we do these big reviews after we finish proposal where we get people from all over the company who are in different areas, and even people who worked on previous related missions who might have retired to come back and review the proposal and add comments in and provide insight. And I highly recommend this. It's very beneficial to have someone who hasn't been looking at this as much as you or your team have to give you feedback. So I would suggest in your cases, even friends you have, other people in your SEDS chapter who aren't working on this project, professors, maybe your SEDS professor advisor, other people in your department that you've worked. So yeah, things like that, and get feedback, because that's how you're going to make a better proposal. So those are most of my little tips and tricks I've learned. And the last part, again, just have fun with proposals. I really enjoyed working on them, and this is a skill that all of you should put on your resumes in your little SEDS section you probably have, that you've worked on a proposal for a certain amount of money, because companies redo proposals all the time, and it's a great way to bolster your resume. And it's just fun to work together with a team to put together a really cool concept, and yeah, hopefully win that prize money. So just have fun with it. And if you have any questions, contact me at this email, and I would be glad to talk to you one-on-one or answer questions via email, whatever you guys want. I'm here to help you out. And yeah, I think that's everything. I didn't want to cram too much more information in here, or all of you would be asleep. So yeah, I think that's it for me. So we could go into Q&A if anyone has questions to get us started.
Yes, thank you, Sapna. Yeah, feel free to either put them on the chat or raise your hand and come up audio to ask your questions. This would be a really perfect time to ask more individual questions related to your project or to your chapter, especially if your chapter doesn't have that much experience in the project proposal part. And we have Jay and myself here, which will be part of the judging committee. So it's kind of like your last chance. Reminder that proposals are due next Sunday. So you got a week.
Yeah, it's gonna be a all-nighter kind of situation. Yeah. That's what proposals are, and then you submit it, and then you all can chill out and celebrate.
Exactly. Okay.
So, Owen.
Thank you, Owen. Owen is from our Georgetown chapter.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Did he come to SEX this year?
I don't think so, but many of his chapters did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sick, unfortunately, but yeah, I think 5 to 6 students come out. It was a good time.
Yeah, you'll have to come next year. I'll be the manager, so I'm a little biased, but it's gonna be great.
I've been both times before, so
Oh,
definitely be there
awesome.
next year.
Love to hear that. Yeah, any other questions?
Okay. Well then feel free to message Sapna. Oh, this is something that's going to be done again in the future. Oh, it's such a good question. We don't know. Definitely can't make any promises. For now, it's only going to happen during the spring and not again in the fall. So don't bet on it happening again in the fall. Okay, I'm going to put my email address on the chat and Jay's email address. Jay, if you can put it on the chat for everybody as well. Well, we're gonna go ahead and post this on YouTube, and we'll send the link to everybody so you guys can revisit this presentation. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm putting in my email now in case you have any questions for us. All right, thank you so much, Sapna. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Glad to impart some experience, and yeah, excited to see who the winning team is. So good luck, everybody.